Well, welcome back, everybody. So today, if you're just joining us, we are talking about leadership and the heart of it, how we walk through it, some of the things that are distinctly unique to walking the path of leadership. There's a few things that I just want to remind you about. The speakers that we have some pamphlets that are right over by that table, by that large pole. So please, nicely modeled over there, thank you. So please feel free to take some. If you check out our directory online, you can learn more about them. And please, before you leave, if you want to connect with any of the speakers, please take the time to do it. They're all pretty remarkable human beings. So, but the next person I want to introduce in the last of and I do want to say one more thing. I apologize about that. If you go to our site, we have basically a TV station called SoulTribetv, and this will be on there, and it's also in our directory. So if you weren't able to catch a speaker, please go back, and it's well worth the time to catch what they have to say. So and in my space of being able to introduce my next speaker has proven to be such a remarkable human being to work with. She showed up on my radar in facilitating talking circles, especially teen talking circles, and giving people a chance to really be able to articulate the parts in them that sometimes it might not always be the safest to articulate. And I watched her effortlessly walk in and make friends with all of the teens and all of the people that had been kind of on the outskirts of our community. And the way that she holds herself is very open and very safe. And so it's been just remarkable to see how she holds that part of our community. She also has a great site called In Nature's Wisdom, which has a lot of her writings on it and a lot of the things that she does. And so I'm very excited to be able to introduce my friend Georgia Kamen up to the stage today to talk about mentorship.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. It's been a hell of a year last year, in case you haven't noticed. There's been a lot of swirling going on, and I don't think any of us escaped it. But to coin an old phrase, one of my absolute favorite artists, Brian Andreas, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he's got a great saying, and it goes, "Be sure to hold on tight, because you never know what might happen if you let go." And that has been my motto for jumping off into the abyss of the unknown that we've been talking about. We were just talking before this, those of us that spoke about, we all met today for the first time, and we knew that we were going to be speaking on leadership, but we didn't, we all had our own takes on it and really didn't compare notes, and yet we were all covering a lot of the same things because it's out there in the collective consciousness, and we're all picking up on the fact that it needs to come forward, and the leadership with heart or spirit is huge. The discomfort of change is huge. The good news is we are literally our only jail keepers. And it's taking that courage to get up and put yourself out there, which, believe me, it is hard for everybody, and there is nobody that's exempt from that. But I have been one of those people my entire life who has had my face pressed up against the glass, looking to see what else is out there. I've got this insatiable curiosity. And when Judith mentioned sometimes the birth families we come into and how we can't quite figure out how we got there, but I realized through the years and being the very curious person I was, I came to realize paring things down, I'm an open-minded skeptic. I'm willing to look at anything, and I'm willing to believe that there's always another perspective out there or whatever, but I really understood at the core of it all is us feeling like we matter in this world. And it is so sad to me the number of people, intelligent, talented people, I run into all the time who don't feel at the core of themselves like they have a right to take up space in this world. And it never ceases to amaze me, and some of them have it their entire life. And I came in, we all have our gifts and abilities, and one of mine my entire life has been to see the other side. I don't know why. I don't care if somebody commits the most heinous act in the world. I can be repulsed by their act and think they may truly need to, pay restitution for that, but I still see the other side of where they came from. I feel like I merge with them, and I can see it through their eyes, and I think that that is such a key part of leadership, is that empathy. Empathy, not sympathy, but empathy, of being able to not necessarily agree, but actually see where that person's coming from, is the key to me to having that heart and spirit of leadership. And so I always kind of make myself a promise when I am making a decision on what to do next. I realize how important it is to get to the core of myself and my own self-love before I can go out there and give something to somebody else. It's always a work in progress. It's never an event. But there is something about getting to the core of who you are that helps you be able to stand in your own personal power and space to help somebody else. There's a lot of people, I don't know if anybody's ever been to a therapist. It amazes me the number of, when you get a really good therapist or somebody who helps people work through their emotional issues, there's a lot of them out there that went into that profession because they wanted to help everybody else, but they didn't want to look inside. It takes courage to look inside and look at your woundings and what brought you there.
What would a guy have to do to get a glass of orange juice or something along those lines?
Give that guy some orange juice, please. Self-love. You need some orange juice.
It's a priority.
I know. So the self-love part of that is huge, and I have friends who are in that industry now that are therapists and psychologists, different fields of it, and they all say, be very careful who you go to. We love our colleagues, but I'm telling you, most of them out there are drawn to that because they won't look at their own stuff. So it happens in everything, and I look for it in leaders. When I'm looking, and leaders have many different faces and things that they do, but I look for that self-love, and to me, that's an absence of stepping into your ego to do what you're going to do. It takes humility and vulnerability to be a good leader, I truly believe. The old paradigm that we're moving out of, that everybody's mentioned, has been more of a power over in leadership, and it began to lack the spirit, and as did a lot of other things in society, the crashing of the banking systems and the way that a lot of people's prior ways of trying to connect to something bigger than themselves quit serving themselves because the spirit wasn't there. And I think that probably if I had to pick the two biggest things that stand in the way of stepping into leader or mentoring someone else or ourselves, ego would be the first one. It's hard to overcome. It's that caring what somebody else thinks. And the freedom that comes from getting beyond that and realizing that everybody's opinion of us is none of our business. We are the only person who knows us, and everything else is just a perspective. Reality is nothing more than another person's perspective to them. We could all be sitting there watching exactly the same thing and come away with 5, 10 different perspectives on it. So when you think of it that way, sometimes it's a little bit easier to let go of the whole thing. In shamanism, there is a practice called being hollow, and that is also referred to as being nothing. When I first heard that in my studies, I thought, boy, that's kind of harsh, being nothing. But I was confusing that with self-esteem, and ego is not self-esteem. It has nothing to do with self-esteem. And when you want to present yourself authentically, whether people know it or not, they pick up that too much ego and not enough authenticness from people, and it speaks without words, and it affects people and how they react to you. Also, trust. People have a hard time trusting. We get hurt, we get burned, and it's hard to put yourself out there, as many have spoken to today, and know that, again, the trust has to come from inside. It's an inside job. It has to begin inside. Mentoring, I normally think of it in terms of young people and, people from my generation, but that's really only a part of it. Mentoring has to do now with ourselves. It has to do with mentoring yourself and taking care of yourself so that you can be of service to somebody. And then it's mentoring your sisters, your brothers. It's very widespread. Mentoring our elderly, mentoring whatever, the earth. It's mentoring to me is about providing a vision for someone else of the higher part of them that they can rise to see. Sometimes people don't see their greatness unless you help them see it. Also, trust is in our society. I don't know about you, but I got very jaded with everything that went on with Wall Street. I don't know how the youth coming up in the generation underneath me, I don't know how they even believe anything that's out there. The media, there's a spin on everything. I do remember a time when a newscaster would get up and actually give the news without a spin of some type of a political spin, this way or that way. You just got the truth. That isn't true anymore. You have to really go out and look for the truth. The reality TV shows, which drive me crazy, aren't reality at all. They're picking the people who are the most dysfunctional that are going to make the best entertainment, and that's what they're calling reality. No wonder nobody knows what reality is. I posted on Facebook. I normally use Facebook for my work, but I was so fed up, and it wasn't with her per se, but Whitney Houston's death. Very talented, loved her music. It's tragic. It's especially tragic for her daughter and her mother. But after seeing the list of names that came to the funeral, which is fine, and the fact that they were flying the flags half-mast in New Jersey after that, and everything you pick up and everything you read, it just went on. It pushed her up to godlike status, and I think of all the people out there that get up every day, the ordinary people, and they put their pants on one leg at a time, and they go out there and they keep pushing for what they think is right or for a change. And I got on there and I posted a thing to exactly that, and I've never seen such a firestorm of things start up. I I keyed back in, I had 20 responses. I wasn't even looking for a response. They just, across the board, how could you, some of us need that. How could you be so judgmental? But that wasn't my point. But I did exactly what I meant to do, and that was stir things up. Things need to be stirred up. People need to come out of their complacency and step out of their sheepleness and start using their minds to really think and step out of, I think people have gotten complacent out of fear and they've given up. And we need to get really, really curious first about what's inside of us and then what's going on out there. It is done in baby steps, and there's no other way to do it. But to be a mentor, the qualities that I've come up with that I think are really important is to leave your ego at the door, especially if you're working with young people, because as one young lady here so aptly been an example, they don't always need to be bestowed with our wisdom from the upper generation. We can do that in other ways by example. We can plant seeds, get them thinking on things we've had experience with, but they need to be recognized as the intelligent members of society that they are. There's a lot of old souls walking around in young bodies right now, and it's growing. And those of us that work with them see it, and those that work with youth and even children see it. It's not the children coming in that were coming in when we were kids, and it's not that we didn't have our own quality, but there's something special, and they're going to be literally the ones stepping in to who they are, and they come in here with a stronger sense of who they are, but they're looking for support, and they're trying to figure it all out, and a lot of them, as a lot of us, are wounded because of things that have happened to them in their life already, and they need to be able to step out of that and have an image of themselves, a higher vision of themselves held up for them to look at, so that they can see what they're capable of doing. And to do that, they need you to be authentic, and I've heard it over and over and over from them. They really, really need you to just be authentic. They don't want the great leader. It's not a lack of respect for our positions, but it's more of a peer, in a way, a giving and receiving. I have learned as much from some of the teens I've talked to, and they're sensitive. They're very empathic, and they have real high BS barometers. They know when they're being BS'd. They know better. I was a kid like that, and school was not fun for me because it was all black and white. There was a right answer or a wrong answer. We weren't encouraged to think outside the box, and that's where I lived. I was this fluid peg trying to be shoved into a square hole, and it didn't work, and I think it was miserable, and it was painful, and I think that I went through it in hindsight so that I could understand the kids and the young people that I work with, because I understand, I see them everywhere I go. I see them along the perimeters. I saw them at the perimeters in the schools when my daughters were in school. I recognize those kids that don't fit in. The Seattle Art Institute, the people there go and they literally have scouts that go through the high schools in the senior classes, and they look for the kids at the back of the class that look like they're daydreaming, the ADD, ADH kids that are out there, and those are the kids they go for because they might be the ones who come up with the next great commercial or whatever the art venue they're in. There's so much value to the creativity of young people, and they're not so far removed from that first time of coming in. They still have a handle on the fact they have a sense they're here for a reason. And they know that something's different, but they're trying to figure out what it is. So they need those adults that are aware and awake themselves to help them do that. The other thing that's extremely important is listening. Sometimes it's not about talking, it's about listening. And that was another, at times, painful lesson for me. You think, how tough could it be? But it's really tough. If you sit there and do an exercise with a friend and you swear you're going to listen, and then all of a sudden you find yourself thinking about what you're going to do when you get done there, or a list you got on something else, or what you're going to say next, you're not really present to listen. And listening is where people get that first seed planted sometimes that they matter. And I have seen the most amazing things come out of that. I see a light in their eyes. It literally a light that kind of lights up when it's that first moment that they actually got heard. Our spouses love us, our parents love us, our friends love us, but a lot of times we never really have been listened to and witnessed just for how we feel, so that you're not being judged. It's not even about, like I said, agreeing with the person, but it's actually just listening. And there's a energetic attached to that. I am a healer, which really means that what I do is personal work with people, that personal growth. That's really what healing is, and that's what energy healing is. I do sacred circles with women where they get a chance to speak, because women need that venue to be able to get up and do that. I do it with kids and teens, young people, and I do coaching, spiritual and personal coaching, but it's really using the energetics and the physics of it, because it's very connected to physics, and going through and helping them look at and get past the things that are standing in the way of them moving forward. The other thing a mentor needs to do, and this has been spoken to as well, is be human, not perfect. They do not want to see perfection. When you put perfection up in front of somebody, it makes them want to curl up in a fetal position and give up, because they can't reach it. Nobody can reach it. Perfection isn't even possible. Why they even have it in the dictionary is beyond me. I remember my father parenting that way. He meant well, but he always had a bar he thought you could reach higher for, and I kept saying, God, could you just let out with a string of profanity or something so I know you're human? I hated it as a kid. I just hated it. And telling your own stories, the mythology's been out in the collective consciousness a lot. I'm hearing it over and over. Michael Meade, so many people are out there, mythologists, very talented mythologists, and they're using myths from the ancient cultures because there's so much wisdom there. They're not myths, they're truths that have come down through the generations, and it's important to tell our stories. We learn from each other's stories, and it shows us that we're all human, and we're all in this, and we're all connected. We're all in this together. I call it the human soup. It's important to be flexible, and as a mentor, I never try to fix. I can't fix anybody, but I try to empower them to help themselves. I get people that come to me for healings that ask me to fix them, heal them. I went, you have to heal yourself. I can't heal anybody. It has to be something you want, that you're willing to work on, and it takes work, but the payoff is indescribable. It also there's a law of reverberation in physics, and what energy is expended out multiplies 10 times, and it goes forward. And if you put out something good, a good positive thing, whatever it goes out to, it hits and it reverberates back another 10 times. It does that when you put out something negative too. And our thoughts have so much more power. We literally create our reality by how we think. It's more powerful. If more people realized how much power our thoughts had, they'd be so much more careful of everything they do. I even try to remind myself of that behind the wheel of the car when I'm going, and I go, wait a minute, never mind. Maybe they're just having a bad day. But a culture begins to break down when its youth are unwelcome and rejected, and its elders aren't remembered and respected. And that's huge. A culture begins to break down when its youth are unwelcome and rejected, and its elders aren't remembered and respected. And we've got a huge culture gap right now in our society. There's not an honoring of our elderly people. They're pretty much hustled off to nursing homes or whatever when they get to the point they can't take care of themselves, and they're forgotten. I used to do work in hospice for about 5 years, and it was a great training ground for energy work, and I saw so many lonely elderly people who had an immense amount of stories and things to give, but nobody cared. Nobody cared. I remember when my husband and I were first married, he had a uncle who was 100 years old, and he was an old farmer, Uncle Lester. He would sit over in the corner at the family functions. Everybody was friendly to him, but nobody really took the time to talk to him. And one day I started talking to him, and he lit up, and he started telling me about the first car driving down the street in his town, and how they all ran out of the house and looked to hear this car coming, and they were amazed to see this machine rolling down the road on rubber tires. And I told my extended family, you should do a video. You should do that so that the grandchildren can see it. They never saw the value, and they never did, and he died. And his stories went with him, and it's really tragic to see that happen. In the ancient tribal societies, the elders are revered, and they help raise the children. Because of their life experience, they're able to add something to that. Ageism in our society. We value youthfulness, but we don't value our youth. We're willing to go get surgeries and Botox put in our faces and all kinds of things. We want to look like kids, dress like kids. We're afraid. There's a paranoia. We go out into the workforce, and we're afraid that we won't get the job if we don't appear younger, or we worry about our health care, things like that. Socially, it's a matter of fear or grace. I personally have earned every last line and bump on my body. And if I prefer in a perfect world not to have it, but I earned it, and I wouldn't go back again to what I had to learn to relearn it again. I think your attitude and the way you think, again, your thought processes have a lot to do with how you age and how vibrant you appear, and how connected you stay to your creativity. Creativity and imagination is what lights young people up, and that's I think what draws me to them is I feel that. They look for our vision, and we love their creativity and their imagination. It feeds us. They don't need to know how to live. They just need support and and seeds. They need to have seeds planted to get them thinking about things that haven't occurred to them yet. None of us know what we haven't learned yet. That's why I always keep an open mind, and that's why it's hard for me to understand sometimes why people get stuck in their belief systems and they can't go beyond it. It's fear. It's fear of being wrong or the uncertainty out there. But all the things that we haven't learned, all the things that I've yet to learn, I thank God I'll have a lot to do, because I would not want to be sitting here bored, and I don't think that's going to happen. Also, youth, I think, and really all of us, they need three things to really thrive, and creativity and the arts is one. It's a way for them to get their ideas and feelings out and express themselves. Here at the bookstore, there are a group in their 20s, and they're really into music and poetry, and they're very talented, really talented and insightful, and they need places like this to express that, and Clint and Sarah are so great about that, and they do their own type of mentoring with that too. Also, like Judith was saying, some type of a spiritual practice and a way to connect to something bigger than themselves, to get what that means. The people my age, I know, that were never raised with any idea of anything bigger than themselves. As I've known them through the years, some of my friends I've had for 40 years, I've seen the ones that never did really struggle with how to grab onto something bigger when life gets tough, because God knows it's a wave. But the waves are there for a reason, because without the tough times, we wouldn't grow. We probably wouldn't be pushed to grow, and sometimes it's hindsight that we see the benefit. Also, nature. That's coming up more and more, but there is a connection and a true consciousness in nature that it's palatable and it's very real. And I really had this brought home to me in the last couple years. It kept, I don't know why, it's the synchronicity of life. I was, everywhere I looked and everything I read, all of a sudden horses. I was dreaming about horses. I've always been an animal lover, and I love horses, but I don't have a horse, and so it wasn't at the forefront of my thought, but I literally couldn't get rid of that image. And everywhere I went, I started seeing pictures. I'd go into a art gallery that I'd been to the week before, and all of a sudden, they were doing a whole big, huge display on horses, and I was like, God, what is up with the horses? Finally, I heard about a workshop, and I went out, and it was conducted by a Reiki shaman, and it was out in Enumclaw, and it was a 10-hour workshop working with horses. And I went, for some reason, I just felt maybe I should go, and I went out there, and it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. We were matched up, it was a group of women, we were matched up with horses, and we sat in a circle to begin with in some chairs in the middle of the barn. And the two oldest mares, the matriarchs, were let loose. The others, the one I got who misbehaved quite a bit, the young gelding, was not allowed in there at the time. But he kept kicking the door to make sure everybody knew he was there. And they shared why they were there. And out of 10 women, probably 5 were really, really crying hard. It brought up so much emotion. Some of them had had horses as children. Some of them were afraid of horses. They'd never been around them. They were just kind of big. They liked them, but for all their own reasons, there was something coming up. And the mares would come over as they cried, and they would put their soft little velvety noses on their shoulders and just rest their noses on there like they were giving them healing energy. It was really amazing to see how tuned in they were. And the owner was a horse whisperer. She was a Microsoft corporate management, and she woke up one day, as many women are doing, and said, "This is not what I want to do." And she found a way to buy this horse farm, and she trains the horses, and she's very connected to them. And she taught us, she said, "You're not going to be using your body language or your words today. No hand gestures. You're going to put a mental picture in your head, and the horse is going to tune into your energy." I knew it was possible. I'd never done it with a horse. But she said, "I want you to watch this." And out in the pasture was a horse grazing away, and it reached its head up, and it slowly started walking in, and it put its nose right up on her forehead just by her thoughts. And I went, "Wow, this is going to be really cool." So I was all pumped up and ready to go, and I got the horse I deserved, and which happens to me a lot. That's okay. And throughout that process, I'm one of those people who's always kind of, and I run on a very shamanic dynamic, which is a little isolated too. I tend to do my own thing, don't like jumping through other people's hoops kind of thing. And when I'm hiking, I love to hike, but I'm always the first one down the trail, just boom. It's not a race, I just walk fast. And I would walk with this horse, and I could feel him tune into me, but as soon as I got too far ahead, he would just disconnect. He didn't care. He just wandered off to get some hay. And I would go, "Oh." So I'd have to start again, and I'd start again, and pretty soon he'd tune into me, and I learned how to stay in rhythm with him. And I learned a lot about partnership, and then I started to notice in the collective, more and more people were talking about how we can't be isolated lone wolves. This is about connectedness. And I went, there's my lesson. Then I watched them as they ate, and it took them an hour to eat a pile of hay, and I realized they don't call it grazing for nothing. They're not in a hurry. They're also not thinking about tomorrow. They're not thinking about yesterday. They're right in the moment all the time. And they're very sensitive to what's going on. They know they're sensitive to the respect you show them walking up, and you're nice horse, it's jarring. It's the same way with people. It's that gentleness of learning not to be the bull in the china closet at times, and I learned how to be more gentle. I learned grace. Everywhere they walk, they're graceful. They talk about the wild horses out there trampling the vegetation. If you've ever seen horses walk, they don't trample anything. They step around, they step over. All of the natural kingdom does that. The only people that trample things are humans. We're the only ones that trample things, that get greedy, that feel like we need to have power over. They're all out there mirroring for us in nature what intrinsically is how we were made to be to begin with till we got off track. And nature is such a powerful teacher to me for that. The unconditional love. If anybody's had a dog, I was never worthy of being as cool as my dogs ever thought I was. But, thank God somebody does. And then you got the cat to teach you respect. They're all about respect. But the nature, putting the youth back in touch with nature and people from our generation, it's really, really important. Having rites of passage. There's nothing really anymore that allows elders to step up into that position of honoring, or to allow youth to step up into being a man, being a woman. What does that mean? They go out there and they figure out on their own, and it's not always in a great way, but they're going to do that because it's an intrinsic need, and unless we show them some better ways to do it, how are they going to know? We have to figure out some ways because we've lost it too. And I think those are really important in keeping a society, a tribal society, together. Also, I think that cultural shifts, you know, I hear a lot of people saying, and some of it's true, that a lot of the people in the generation underneath me have an idea that a lot's owed to them without the work. But where did that come from? Who created it? You know, it happens in every culture. It's not about finding fault, but it's about being aware so that you don't make the same mistakes. You can't change what you don't recognize. If you've got, you know, the 60s and 70s, I hate to date myself too much, but what the heck? Remember, I don't care. That's right. The 60s and 70s, you know, we sprung out of the 50s with the Donna Reed and the, you know, the high stilettos. Of course, my mother never wore those, or the full skirt and the apron, and, you know, people busted out because it was too restrictive. And there was a beginning of something that needed to grow out of that, that needed to rebel. But as Judith said, it's like the pendulum, you know, it swings too far one way or the other until it finally comes into balance, hopefully. But in my youth, and this is what I noticed in some of the circles I was in with mixed ages of women, there was a real butting of heads between my generation and the women in their late 20s and early 30s. And the women in my generation were trying to be heard. Some of them were saying, "You have no idea what we did for you," busting into the women's movement. And the younger women are like, "Oh, God, not that again." You know, it was the wrong dynamic. But I thought, boy, if there was ever a perfect situation for truly listening to both sides so that both sides could see the perspective, it would be so helpful and healing for both sides. Our kids, my kids' generation, they've been through their own things. They're going through things I never went through. But we had our, you know, Vietnam War. I remember walking into my parents' living room and watching the Kent State riots, you know, which were really peaceful. It was kids, my kids' age, 20, 21, 22, protesting a war that wasn't right. They might not have known all the details, but they knew something was wrong. It was wrong, and every major political leader in the U.S. since then has at some point in time in some way apologized and said they were dead wrong. But I watched our government shoot those kids at point blank range, shoot them down, murder them in cold blood. And I remember being so stunned and thinking, I can't believe this is happening in the United States. The, you know, racial divide. I grew up in the South, in Alabama. My father was with Boeing, and we got transferred down there. And I lived in the town right next to where Martin Luther King was shot. And I remember seeing that day, and that just sick feeling of going, oh my God, and we had the riots in our classrooms. And I remember still seeing movie theaters with signs saying whites only, blacks only water fountains. What's up with that? You know, they were only, black people were allowed up in the balcony, but that was it. I remember just being stunned, even as a kid, and going, what is up with that? I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. And this was the, you know, my elders, supposedly, from that society doing that. But there was a lot of painful things that happened. In the women's lib movement, there are young women in corporate America today that they would be stunned to know what happened in corporate America back when I was in it for 15 years. And it was, I mean, boy, how many times do you think, boy, if I was me now back there, I would have just let, you know. But it was stunning, and it was very abusive, very abusive, emotionally, physically, terrible. So They don't know because they weren't there. And you can't judge them for that any more than they can judge us and say, this is all your fault. We're all doing the best we can, but it's about being perceptive enough to seek other ways of doing things that serve us better. So when we grew up and had kids, a lot of women went to work. You know, they wanted to work. They wanted to do that. But it swung so far the other way that there became a shame about staying home with your kids if you chose to do that or you could do that. People started to look down their nose at it, and people began to go back to work that didn't even want to. They were pushed to do that. A lot of kids, you know, we were making a lot of, you know, our society, our generation was making more money than our parents had. And in our minds, we thought, buy, materialism, you know, and that's where our values started to go. And we started to buy our kids a lot of things because we wanted them to have a better life. If I heard that dime for every time I heard that from a parent, I want them to have what I didn't have. But what they were giving them was material things. And the kids grew up expecting it, as kids would. The respect for the elders, you know. I know a lot of great kids. I love them dearly, but I remember coming home with my children from an errand one day and walking in, and there's a second grader behind us in there making a sandwich in my kitchen. He was hungry. Nobody was home, so he walked in and made himself a sandwich. I wish I could say it was an isolated incident. It's happened all through their things in different states. Or they're walking up, you know, calling you a dork or a dumbass, like they would their kids. They're not looking at you. It's like that lack of respect. They just don't know. They haven't been raised to have that appreciation for it. They're also told that everybody's a winner and nobody's a loser. They weren't ever taught that it's okay sometimes when you really bust your ass and do something well. Congratulations, good for you. Those kids got to the point where they didn't care about trying too hard anymore because they got no recognition and kudos for doing it. So there's a lot of that all fed into the people thinking they deserve, you know, the kids thinking they deserve. We created that, and they don't know unless we show them something different. And they lost their connection to spirit. People got so busy that they quit connecting to anything bigger. Even around a dinner together as a family, that became a thing of the past. So all the chaos, there's a chaos theory in physics, and all chaos is an energetic as well, but out of chaos often comes great creativity. It shakes things up and it's very uncomfortable, and that's where we're at in our society right now. I feel it's very uncomfortable out there because we're being shaken out of our complacency into looking at something else that serves us better. But the end result I think is going to be huge. I think it's going to be very positive. And it's something that we need the leaders and the mentors to step forward and push out for people. Marriage is another thing. Over and over and over again for the last 3 or 4 years especially, I could probably name 20 people I know very well. Family members, really good friends, neighbors, all walking out of marriages that were 25 or 30 years old. And I remember doing a circle with teenagers, a mixed group, boys and girls, 10 kids over on Bainbridge about 3 years ago, and I mentioned the marriage thing, and I can honestly say in every single instance, the woman left, walked out, wasn't being served. Our masculine and feminine energies have gotten so out of balance that they couldn't maintain it in relationships either. And the kids in that group, 7 out of the 10 were from divorced families, and 2 of them were in the middle of going through it right then, and every one of them almost bored a hole through me, and I could see the wheels turn. They had no idea how to avoid it, what was wrong, and how does that, 25, 30 years and they didn't make it, what's the hope for me? And it really is on their mind, and that's been on my mind a lot the last years. There's a real imbalance there, and that's why I really applaud you, Judith, for including the men, because just working on one side isn't going to help. It's got to be a collective thing, and both sides are hurting. It's nobody's fault and society's big problem. And I've blogged about it a lot because it really bothers me. And these kids need to know how they've never had mirrored to them what's successful about that. How do they go out there and be successful? And how do we know unless we figure it out ourselves? And I'm still working on it. But I'm getting a lot closer to understanding what the difference is. We've been pushed out of our instincts that have come up through our DNA since the beginning of time, the roles that men have and the roles that women have, and our instincts that we have, the hunters, the gatherers, and there's so much more to it. But when our society changes, and it changes completely opposite to what those roles are, nothing ever feels quite right. It's out of kilter. It needs to be balanced out somehow. I think I'm going to do another talk on that one day. That's a big subject. But basically, I guess the thought that I'd like to leave everyone with the most is that mentoring, I think it has to start in baby steps of however. There's a million ways to do it, and we're all drawn to what we're drawn to because of our own natural instincts and gifts, and that's what makes it a great thing. There's never a shortage of things to address. When I pass a person on the street, in the sidewalk, if I'm standing in line at the drugstore, I just say, hi, how's it going? That's all. And you'd be surprised at the look on some people's face. Even if it's a homeless person down at the market, I look at them, first they're kind of shocked because nobody's talked to them for who knows how long. There was a great guy here who's got a book out there. His name is Paradon. 7 foot, hard to miss him. He was formerly homeless, but he talked about the compassion. So many people pass by them, and they say they don't look at them because they don't have the money, or they feel uncomfortable. And he said, or they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't have any money. And he said, there's a million ways to help somebody without money. And sometimes just acknowledging them as a human being that day is really what they needed. And he said he had an incident where the ambulance was taking him to Harborview at one point in time, and the ambulance driver asked him for his name, and he said, I got to thinking, nobody has asked my name in a year. I've been out here and not one person's asked me my name. So it's those small pebbles and the ripples out in the lake, and you never know where they go. But starting that way, and there's the Red Tent movement, which is it started up with some people out of the bookstore here, which is a great thing for women of all ages and generations. You can Google it in. There's groups of them all over the place that support women connecting with each other in lots of great ways. There's the talking circles. There's the sacred circles, which I do, which just allow, and a lot of other people do, just allow women to get together and support each other outside of that feeling competitive with each other or whatever. It's a supporting, non-judgmental, safe place to tell the truth. And that's really all it is. So I think that the elders and the youth are at the polar ends of a society that needs to have those connected for two very different important reasons, because the elders bring the vision and the wisdom, and the youth bring the imagination and the wonderment. And if we don't have imaginative ways to do things, we'll keep doing things the same way we've done them, and we see where that's gotten us. Not very far, obviously. So, I'd invite really anyone to get on if you need suggestions. I'm happy to give you suggestions of places you can get involved. The Evergreen Hospice program on the east side is great. Great program, great training. Even if you didn't work in hospice, the training is amazing in and of itself. So there's so many things sprouting up as we're coming into this more of a spirit-oriented place of people starting up their own groups of things they see that they're not finding a group for. That's another possibility. But thank you very much for coming today. And does anybody have any questions for me or anything I can answer, or anything you'd like to say?
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, it's all this, yeah, that's true. It's all part of the same big picture. Okay, thank you.